Vampires. They immediately conjure images of Bram Stoker's Dracula for some, and the glittery Cullen Clan of Twilight series for others. But there are centuries worth of stories to draw upon even before Bram Stoker's Dracula. The history of vampiric folklore dates back far more years than you probably think. Come the spooky season, you might just want to be aware who is around you. Until the 20th century, many people still believed that stories about vampires were true. Across cultures and continents, the vampire's power is attributed to phenomena that medicine has yet to explain, such as the spread of disease in the Middle Ages or what happens to the human body after death. But in the late 1800s, authors like Stoker, who gave us one of the most famous vampires in history, created a more seductive alternative story. Now, vampires are no longer serpentine predators, but tortured romantics who never age. With that being said, let's look into a brief history of vampires, and even some vampire hunters. The first vampire story is difficult to pinpoint. The images of attractive night strollers that we think of today were largely shaped by popular culture dating back to the 1800s. But the seeds of the modern concept have appeared in mythology since early history. The story of Sekhmet, the Egyptian cat warrior goddess associated with the plague and healing, is considered to be one of the oldest vampire stories. Legend has it that the sun god Ra sent his daughter Sekhmet to punish humans for their disobedience. But after Sekhmet couldn't stop drinking blood in the midst of her massacre, Ra quenched her thirst by dyeing beer red, which she drank and slept for 3 days. Many cultures have the visual equivalent of a life-draining creature. For example, in the Philippines, there is the Manananggal, who some people say can turn into a woman, suck blood from pregnant women's bellies, and hate garlic. Vampires, as we know it, were actually born in Europe. During the Middle Ages, variations of the original vampire myth spread throughout Europe, with the infamous monsters often used to explain plagues and other illnesses. Cases of a rare blood disorder called porphyria in Eastern Europe may be responsible for some of the physical characteristics attributed to vampires. Symptoms of porphyria include sensitivity to light, causing skin to blister or burn upon exposure, hallucinations, and receding gums, which cause teeth to appear longer. Vampires have long been associated with Transylvania, a historical region of Romania, largely because it is the homeland of the fictional character Dracula, and it is a deliberate choice of Bram Stoker due to local superstition. In Romania, fear of the strigoi, ancient monster that require blood to survive, has existed for hundreds of years. In fact, in 2005, The Guardian reported on a vampire-slaying ritual in a village in Romania carried out after the family of deceased worker Petra Toma decided that he would become a vampire. 6 men exhumed the body, staked it, and sprinkled it with garlic, and used a pitchfork to slit Toma's ribcage. Toma's neighbor told the media they cut out the heart, burned it, and drank the ashes in a glass of water. In neighboring Bulgaria, a 700-year-old skeleton discovered in 2012 bears witness to the region's custom of killing vampires, pinned with stones to prevent the dead from coming back to life. Meanwhile, in a mass grave for 16th century plague victims discovered by archaeologists in Italy in 2006, a brick was hammered into the jaw of a woman's skeleton. While other researchers argued that the brick only fell into the skull's mouth while in the tomb, anti-vampire rituals became a reality in Europe and eventually in the United States. Exorcism was also used at the time on people suspected of being vampires in Europe. Disease caused rise of vampire fear and hunting in New England. In the 1800s, people in rural New England would dig up, desecrate, and bury the bodies of their neighbors. According to Bell's book, Food for the Dead, this happened at least 60 times. Historians say this is another case where vampires were blamed for a widespread infectious disease, tuberculosis. The most famous example is Mercy Lena Brown, a 19-year-old woman from Exeter, Rhode Island. In 1892, Brown was exhumed along with her mother and sister. Mercy's father reluctantly shared concerns that an evil force may attack his farm. While her mother and sister were reduced to bones, Mercy's body lay on its side and had little decomposition of hair and fingernails. According to Bell's account, a local doctor confirmed that this was normal because she had passed away only 8 weeks earlier. But the townspeople were not swayed by medical expertise, because so many people had died helplessly from the disease we now know as tuberculosis that they removed and burned their hearts. The ashes were then mixed into an elixir for the sick, a popular anti-vampire method in New England. Now, vampires became both scary and seductive in the 19th century. By the time the people of Exeter burned poor Mercy Lena Brown's heart, the province's fear of vampirism was clashing with modern scientific thought. Ritual desecration of graves also upset the Catholic Church. In the late 1700s, Pope Benedict XIV declared that vampires were false figments of the human imagination. Over the next century, more and more creative works would bring new fantasy images, giving vampires a major overhaul of their image. Stories like John Polidori's 1819 The Vampire, Carmilla, Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu's 1872 series about a female vampire, and Dracula captivated audiences with romantic tales in the Gothic style. Dracula may have been inspired by real people. All of these stories were inspired by Central and Eastern European folklore, perhaps especially Dracula, since Stoker researched Transylvanian culture to write it. Count Dracula is said to be partly inspired by the real Vlad III Dracula, more commonly known as Vlad the Impaler. A 15th century Romanian warrior prince, Vlad was famous for his brutal methods of torture on the battlefield. True to his name, he impaled his enemies and left thousands bleeding. Since the first vampire story craze in the 1800s, the legends took off in every direction imaginable. Vampires go to high school, they could be a superhero in a leather duster, or they live a normal life on Staten Island. Nowadays, most stories feature iterations of cold-blooded parasite archetypes, or more human-like versions, with their own internal struggles and emotions, often feelings for people, from Buffy to Bella Swan. And as for why people think vampires drink blood, a lack of knowledge about the very gross things that happen to the human body certainly fueled the idea. As a corpse's skin shrinks, its teeth and claws may grow longer. And as internal organs deteriorate, dark, purifying fluid can leak from the nose and mouth. When a suspected vampire's body is dug up, the appearance of this cleaning fluid can be mistaken for blood, making it appear as if the deceased has consumed something, whereas they actually expel it. What do you think? Comment down in the section below and don't forget to like and subscribe.